why are you here? Why did you take the time today to come to this beautiful park and hopefully participate in a discussion? And I'm wanting to know. I'm wanting to understand what motivated you to be here. Anybody willing?
The other guys suck.
Okay, well, hey, I'll take it. Yeah, he's actually from the same town.
Good motivator to be here.
I hear that a lot, actually, believe it or not. And what I always say is, I hope, but I'm fine with that, but I hope by the time you leave here, you have a few more reasons other than just voting against the other guy.
We want change.
So, what kind of change do you want?
We want freedom, liberty, and just have big government out of our way.
Okay, I would agree with that. So thank you for articulating that.
I moved up here 3 years from California, and I like Idaho to be Idaho.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. You don't want it to be what you left, right?
so,
Yeah,
I want it to become.
yeah.
I just moved from Washington last October because they wanted to put my kids in masks again. And
Yeah.
I can't do it. I like Idaho. I'm not one of those transplants that's all liberal and wants to change anything. I want to keep it conservative.
Excellent, excellent.
I'm just here to be able to listen to you, your plans, your policies, you know.
Excellent, thank you. Perfect.
I grew up in Connecticut. Back then it was a Republican state. I watched all the people come up from New York and flip it to a Democrat. Do not want, this state is too beautiful. We do not want that to happen out here. We need somebody leading this state who's a fighter, who's not going to just roll over and do like Little's doing right now.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
All right, go ahead.
We're from Clarkson, crossing the river, but we wanted to come and support you. And mostly I've just been following you and watching how you dropped everything to go to support Baby Cyrus and his family. And that, to me, means the world. So we're here for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, if we were Democrats and you could vote in Idaho, you could probably go down to your cemetery and get a few more people to vote for you. But we won't talk about that, right? So I have another question. And I think this is really important. I do this at almost every event that I have. And it's very important, and I'll explain at kind of the end why I believe asking this question is so important. And the question is, what is liberty? Because I have to admit that until certain things happened to me and my family, and we were put in a really terrible situation, I hadn't really thought about it. Of course, I was the guy that would, find a candidate, put his signs in front of in my yard. I would donate to his campaign, or and then I'd go down and vote. That's what I did, and I enjoyed the freedoms that I had, but I never defined liberty until I was sitting in solitary confinement, looking around, hadn't seen my family for months and months and months, and never ever committed a crime, never even had any ill intent at all. And sitting in the worst place that you could possibly be sitting in the United States of America. So I want to ask you this: what is liberty? Anybody want to give it a shot? Oh, okay. I'm expecting you to comment anytime I point my finger, like, just go for it, okay? But not when your mouth is full. Not when your mouth is full.
Well, liberty is what we're endowed with by our Creator.
Absolutely. So, liberty doesn't come from some other source other than God, right? Okay, so that's another reason why it's so important that we define what it is. Right here.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, thank
You had your
I'm a recovering Californian. Are you familiar with Chris Hall?
I am. I know her personally.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
She has a wonderful definition.
Okay.
And it is, liberty is freedom with a conscience.
I would have to agree with that. What else? Right here.
Freedom from sin.
Yeah, so the Spirit of Christ is the Spirit of liberty. We learn that in the Bible. I appreciate that. So, after some time of pondering and having liberty completely stripped from me, and thinking about it quite a bit, I came up with a definition, and then I tested it and kind of refined it a little bit. And it's certainly not my own. I learned that this definition, I can't claim to be the author of it, although I came about it by myself, but many others have as well. And so I'm going to offer this to you, and then I'm going to ask you to test whether you think that this is liberty, to challenge it. Because liberty is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. Now, to give a little bit of authority to it, because I think it's extremely important that we define liberty, for one, so we know who it, and we know what it is, we know when it's taken, and we know who is taking it. And also so we know where it comes from. So let's go to some authority here. Let's go to Thomas Paine. I think he ought to know. I think they did some amazing things that we still benefit from today. And I believe he's a great authority on this. Now, he says it a lot more articulate than I defined it. But listen to this. Liberty is the power to do everything that does not interfere with the rights of others. Thus, the exercise of the natural rights of every individual has no limits save those that assure to other members of society the enjoyment of the same rights. Is he not saying the exact same thing? That liberty is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights? How about Thomas Jefferson? Couldn't be more of an authority when it comes to the documentation and the founding of our country. He said, rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. There he says it again. And then he says, I do not add within the limits of the law, because the law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. Amen. Now, so he's very clearly defining this as that it's unobstructed action according to our will within the limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. And then he's saying that it's not defined by the law. The law is not always what defines liberty. And in fact, it could be the tyrant's will. What defines liberty is the rights of an individual. So let's apply this. So let's into our lives. For example, the freedom to worship. How would we define that according to the definition that we just went through? Well, the ability to worship whenever, however, whoever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. So you can't go and sacrifice someone's animal, someone else's dog or cat, and say, well, I have the right to worship. That doesn't work. But you do have the right to worship whenever, however, and whomever, as long as you are not infringing upon another person's rights. Now, I'm not telling you that that's going to bring you salvation. I'm just telling you that God gave us this right, and our governments were instituted to protect that. And it's equal among all of us. So what about the right to property? That would be we're going to define it, right? To do whatever you want with your property as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Are we losing that?
Oh, no, we've lost it.
Yeah, so you see how we can, when liberty and freedom is defined properly, now we can see when it's lost, and we can see who's taking it. Right? Just who's restricting you from the use of your property when you're not infringing upon anybody else's rights? Like, we all agree that you can't use your property to infringe upon somebody else's rights, right? But we all need to get on the same page, and I think we are here, that we should be able to do whatever we want with our property as long as we're not infringing upon our neighbor's rights. And it's very simple. And our founders understood this, and our laws and our nation was built upon this principle, that a person has the right to do whatever they want as long as they're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. That's what we were built upon. That's what our young men and our women went and suffered and died for. That's what the Revolutionary War was about. And that's what we're losing. The ability to do whatever we want as long as we're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. We're held within those bounds, but we should be free otherwise. The right to travel, the right to trade. I like this one. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about that. To be able to trade with whoever you want, with whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Now that doesn't mean you can go steal something, right, and then trade it. That's not freedom. But if it's yours and you own it or you created it, then you should be able to trade with whomever you want, whenever you want, however you want, with whatever agreement you made. You can't force the other person to buy it, or you can't force a person to sell you something at your terms. It's an equal buyer, willing seller. But freedom to trade is to be able to build the ability to trade whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Is that also not being taken away? It is, right? So this is just a small list of the rights that we have. And we could never list all the rights that we have. There's even rights that we have when it comes to freedoms that we don't even know we have. We may actually find and experience in our lifetime. But ultimately, it boils down to each man or woman should be able to do whatever he or she wants as long as they do not infringe upon another person's rights. And you'll recognize these words from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal that all men are created equal, that they are endowed, that means a gift, they're given by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So defining where our rights come from and clearly stating that liberty is one of those rights. Now, who is the primary author of the Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson. And I just showed you his quote. That is what he meant. That liberty that was in the founding documents of our nation was rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to the will within limits drawn around us by equal rights of others. So there's no question of whether this nation was built upon the right to do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Now, I had a video here and something happened to it, so I'm just going to move through it. And I'll show you another video here in just a little bit. But I want to give you a little bit of background about myself. I actually wish I could spend the time doing this on something else, but I do think it's important that you know who I am. Because if you Google my name, you're just not going to find out the truth. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. There's been a direct attack on me and my family and many, many others like me because we are not willing to yield, and we've had an influence on others, and they're terrified of allowing people like me to get more and more support. And so it is something that I have to go through because you may not know who I am. You may not understand really what makes me tick because CNN certainly doesn't have it right. So I'm going to quickly go through this and hopefully it'll give you a little bit of background of who I am. I was born on a ranch in southern Nevada, the Bundy Ranch. It's the famous ranch from 2014 when all that happened. These are my parents, Cliven and Carol Bundy. I'm grateful for my parents. My mother's actually from Gooding, Idaho, so I got some Idaho blood in me, although I was born and raised in Nevada. My father and mother taught me right from wrong, and they taught me, how to. That is my responsibility to work and produce for myself and take care of my family. That I'm supposed to stand for others when they're in need. I'm supposed to help others when they're in need. And also, I learned when it was right to compromise and when it was not right to compromise. And I'm grateful for that. Now, here's a picture of the Bundy Ranch. You can see it's a pretty arid, dry place. And my family moved into that area in 1877. They actually went in there after another group had gone in there and said it was uninhabitable, that you couldn't live there. And, we always tease it, it took my family to go in there, and they were so stubborn that they just stuck there. And the ranch, like you see it's pretty arid, but what's the lifeblood of the ranch is these springs that were on the foothills of the mountains. And my family went in there and captured these springs. They're just small springs. They just run a little bit of water, but enough to divert it through pipelines all over the foothills of the mountains so that the cattle can eat and graze. But it takes about 100 acres per animal to feed them. So it's not an easy living. It's not. But it's one that my family chose, and now I would be the 5th generation. So there's my father on a horse, and you can see that bull has a little bit of hair on its horn up there. He probably just got done hooking the horse. Kind of rank. It's my little brother, Brandon Calves. This is how I grew up. You can see the stockade corral made out of cedar posts. It's really the only corral other than a steel metal corrals that are expensive. It's really the only corral that'll hold up out in the desert because the wood just dries out. But these are in the ground, and then we put big cables around them, and they make really good corrals. And we have a whole bunch of them all over the range. This is my little sister getting off the bus. She's met by 4 dogs and a calf. And that calf was saved out of his mother because she was hit on the highway. And my dad went and did an emergency C-section and saved the calf. And we ended up raising him, bottle fed him, and he became a huge nuisance. Because he would want to try to come in the house, and he was confused about who he was and what he was. And he would go and lay down in the field next to the house, and the dogs and the sheep, they would all get in one big pile. It was the strangest thing. It's kind of like Boise right now. So when I was about 15 years old, my dad came to me and he said that this ranch isn't big enough for the both of us. And he wasn't being mean, although we had our fair share of knockdown dragouts. I mean, I'm not going to deny that. I've got 4 brothers. We're all close together. And then my dad, and we're on a ranch, and we're doing all these things. And from time to time, seems like about every 6 months, we just have this knockdown dragout. And then we were good friends and buddies and working partners and everything else. But that's not why he came to me. He came to me because he has a lot of children, and he knew that the ranch didn't produce enough living for all of us to go out, get married, and to raise our families on the ranch. That it would only produce enough living for about 2 families. And I was down the line, and most likely he was letting me know at a young enough age that I was going to have to leave the ranch, and that I was going to have to find a living somewhere else. And that was, difficult to think about, but and ultimately that's what happened. I ended up having to leave the ranch. Now before that, or kind of during that, I went and served a mission, an LDS mission in Minnesota. And it was 2 years. I left when I was 19. And I am extremely grateful for that opportunity. Because what it did for me is, one is it refined me. You know, I was pretty rough and coming off the ranch. And now I go to Minnesota and I'm now I'm in a suit and tie, talking to people about Jesus Christ. And it really refined me. So that was good. Definitely good and needed. But what it did for me was it made me contemplate and understand who God was and who His Son is. And I left there after those years dedicated to serving Him. And whatever I did, I knew I'd go out and do all kinds of things like we all do. But whatever I did, I wanted Him to be okay with it. I wanted Him to be the reason I did it. And so I am very, very grateful for that time. That is sacred time to me even today. So after that, I did go to a little bit of school, college in Southern Utah University. I started a business, and I wondered why I stuck around there. I didn't go to college the whole time, but I was in Cedar City for like 6 years. And I kept thinking I had to take my business to a larger metropolitan area because it would do a little better. I got into the fleet maintenance business. But I felt like I should stay in that little town until I finally figured out why I was there. And I was there to, meet my wife, and we got married. And just a few months later, we moved down to Arizona and started our life there. We ended up having 6 children. My oldest now is 20. She lives in Moscow. Her and her husband, they're happy. They're getting ready to have a baby. And my youngest is 7 years old right now. And I got 3 boys and 3 girls. So I'm right in the mix of it. Other than just a few months ago, I had 4 teenagers. Okay? And I'm getting ready to have 4 teenagers again. But my oldest turned 20, and I've got one that's going to be a teenager. She's actually in the RV right now. So here in a little bit. So I'm in the mix of it. Like, I'm in the middle of it right now. And it's not easy to travel around. This is close to, I don't know, we might be a little over. I haven't done the math, but we've done almost 200 town halls or meet and greets in a year and a half. And so I just want you to know that what we're doing is extremely important to us, enough that we would put aside all of these things. I mean, obviously we're not just ignoring I'm not just ignoring my family. No one here is ignoring their family. But it's very difficult to do what we're doing and still take care and do all the things that are required. And which is number one for me, to take care of my family. Now, like I said, we moved to Arizona. And I had started it, so I brought my business down to Arizona, and it was a fleet maintenance business where I went and contracted with commercial fleets, those that mostly did deliveries, to deliver food and all supplies around the towns. And I ended up building up one of the largest private fleet maintenance companies in Arizona. And I've hired hundreds of people, dealt with millions of dollars of budgets, and I built this from scratch. Built it up. And so I had to, develop all the procedures and the policies and all of the hire everybody and all of the training and all of that. It was a lot of work. And the reason I tell you this is because I want you to see a side of me that maybe you didn't know about, a side of me that is able to manage, that is to be an executive, and to have skills that a governor will need. And I certainly have had that. And I run this business for 21 years, and then I ended up selling it. Now, before I sold it, I could see that the industry, the fleet maintenance industry, was in terrible need of technology. And that there wasn't a software out there that was really specific for the commercial fleet maintenance industry. And I looked because I needed it, and it wasn't there. So I decided when I was in business about 16, 17 years that I would make it. I would make one. And I put a team together, I had some resources, put a team together, and it took us several years, and we used my technicians as guinea pigs, my customers, my vendors, and they all knew what I was doing, and all were excited about it and helping, and we did this for several years. And we ended up building a really, really powerful software for the fleet maintenance industry. And it worked so well in our shop that we began to sell it to other shops. And now it's one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. And so again, I started that from scratch, built it up, and was able to take a lot of ideas and a lot of people and get them all going in the right direction. And we created something that's really, really is impacting the fleet maintenance industry right now. And I tell you that again, just to build your confidence in what I've done, so that you can know that, I'm not going to go in and not be able to get things done. I will be able to get things done. I'll be able to create a vision, be able to unite people together in one direction, and make it valuable for the people of Idaho. Now, kind of a little bit of a shift, because I mentioned that when I was contemplating liberty, I was in solitary confinement. And I wish I could go into a lot of detail of how that all happened, but I am going to basically summarize it a little bit, because in 2014, after almost 140 years of ranching in the southern Nevada desert, the federal government sent 213 armed federal agents after my family and basically began to destroy the ranch. They locked it down. They were killing cattle from the air. They killed about 60 head of cattle, burying them in mass graves, destroying the trails and fences, destroying the water infrastructure. Meanwhile, they had armed guards all over, and if we even stepped off the paved road, they would beat and assault us. And you might be asking, well, why did they do this? And a very summarization of this, because there's I could go on for hours and giving you details. But ultimately what happened was they wanted to make my dad's ranch a mitigation area for the desert tortoise. And my dad has deeds with the state of Nevada, grazing rights, deeded grazing rights with the state of Nevada. And the federal government wouldn't recognize them. And my dad's like, these are deeds. They're deeds with the state of Nevada. They wouldn't recognize them. They didn't care. He had ancestral rights. My family had been there 70 years before the Bureau of Land Management was ever even established. And they just said simply he didn't have any rights, and that all the ranchers in that area had to take their cattle off. And my dad ended up saying no. And then when they said, well, we're going to take your ranch anyway, my dad said, hell no. And then it took them a while to muster up the courage to come and do it. And during the Obama administration, they thought they had enough political power, and they had built up these internal armies inside these federal agencies, and they sent them down upon my family. And it was like a fascist nightmare come true. But we didn't yield. We did the best we could of documenting what they were doing and distributing it out to the people across the country, and people started coming. The next thing we know, we have thousands of people at the ranch, and we controlled the PR, public relations, and we ended up basically giving them an ultimatum to leave the area immediately, and they did. And I'll show you a picture. I don't show this all the time, but this is amazing to me, because this is, hang on. This is, I'll get here. Okay. So this is kind of us and a bunch of people coming and standing and saying, you're just not going to do this to us. And there was a lot more people than you can see in this picture there. And then this is them leaving. Now, if you see this freeway, this is I-15, and this is a rear view mirror, so it's going back. And he's about only a third of the way up, and it goes all the way up and winds up, and they're leaving the on the freeway. 107 federal vehicles. And there was multiple agents in most of the vehicles. And so I saw something all within a period of time that was a little bit hard to process at first, because I saw this great threat that was coming down upon my family, and also this great threat to all people across the United States. And then I also saw the solution and how to defeat it by the people coming together, by uniting, and by simply just saying, we're not going to tolerate this type of action. And it was shortly after that that I moved to Idaho. This was a picture taken in 2021, but I moved in 2015 to Idaho, to Emmett, Idaho. And I was kind of trying to get away. You know, this crazy thing happened, and the media there was just a media frenzy. It's never stopped. It's never stopped. And it threw my family into this like limelight that we never asked for. But we tried to respond the best we could. And it's never ever stopped. I remember my dad stepping outside of church on his flip phone. He leans against the church wall, and he's talking to a network that has over 28 countries and over 300 million listeners. And that's just kind of an example of like what happened to our family. We went from this ranching family in the desert to this, just public, family that one side hates and the other side loves. Anyway, I was trying to get away from that a little bit, and I wanted to be up among the people that I felt would, would protect each other, would understand these principles, and I came to Idaho. The problem was that just a couple hours away was the Hammond family, and I don't know if you remember the situation. It was them. It was the same thing going on, but in many ways it was even more egregious than what happened to my family. So they were trying to throw them in prison under just terrible things that they were using the Oklahoma City bombing laws that they created after the Oklahoma City bombing to prosecute and put this family in prison. And so I came to their defense, and I got international attention on what was going on with them. And ultimately, we were able to get President Trump to pardon the Hammond family. And they were able to leave the federal prisons and go back to their families. And so, I want to thank President Trump for that and what he did. However, in between, they arrested us. They arrested me, my brothers, my father, my other brothers. They arrested a whole bunch of other people, and they threw us in prison. And we were in there for 2 years. Half of that time was in solitary confinement. And for me, and never once were able to have any contact with our wives or children. Never once. They kept us away. It was a terrible experience, but we fought through it, and we wouldn't yield. We would not take a plea deal like they wanted us to, so that they could get a win and not have what they had done to us exposed. But we took him to trial in Oregon, and we beat him in Oregon. A Portland, Oregon jury found us not guilty, which was just amazing, right? On all charges. I know. It is a miracle, absolutely. And then we went down to Nevada. We had to fight down there for over a year down there. And we exposed them so bad that they finally had to dismiss the case with prejudice. We found out that the FBI was the one driving all of this, and that they had withheld over 3,800 files of exculpatory evidence. And when we finally figured that out, at the very end, after just over 2 years of being in federal prison, we were finally able to figure that out and start to bring that. The court finally just said, we don't want to expose all these files, and they let the case go, and we walked out of there without even a misdemeanor and went back to our lives. But I have to admit, because at that time, I didn't want anything to do with government. I even refused to vote. I refused to vote. I refused to register. I didn't want anything. All I wanted to do is take care of my little family, and I wanted the rest of the world to go away. And then 2020 came around, and I began to see. I saw clearly what was happening. A lot of other people were wondering what was going on, and there was no question in my mind what was going on, because I had experienced it, I had seen it. It was very clear. So I went to work. I felt like I couldn't be silent any longer. I couldn't be still, even though I did not want to. I went to work, and I, did a whole bunch of things in Idaho and across the country. And we mounted a huge response and pushback to all of these things. And unfortunately, including the Baby Cyrus thing, I was arrested since 2020. I've been arrested 8 times in Idaho. Never once have I ever threatened anybody, hurt anybody, damaged any property. Never once, none of that. But when you face and expose those and tell the truth, and what I'm going to do here, specifically to others, then they begin to target and attack you. And so that hasn't been easy either. My time here in Idaho, to be honest with you, has been not that great. But I still believe, because of the people, not because of our government here in Idaho, not because of who has control of our government, I still believe that this is the right place to be. And I'm going to do all I can to try to secure liberty and freedom here in Idaho, in this beautiful state. So let's talk about Idaho. Because Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. A real battle. Now, to give you some facts, since 2015, approximately 248,000 people have moved to Idaho. That's the fastest growing state. We're the fastest growing state in the United States. And so that just kind of give you some perspective. That's about 20,000 more than the entire city of Boise. Now imagine adding the city, the size of Boise, to Idaho every 10 years, because that's what's happening. And the way it looks, that's what's going to continue to happen. Talk about a challenge, right? That alone, like it or not, is a challenge, a huge challenge. But to make matters worse, approximately 36% of the people coming to Idaho are liberal-minded, and they want desperately to change the gem state traditions, our conservative values, into a more liberal, progressively woke place to live. And they're very active in it, much more active than we are. In fact, to give you a little bit of a statistic, in the primaries, Democrats vote 3-1 over the Republicans. And if we continue with the statistics, with the move-ins, and then them being way more active than us, within 5 years, the Democrats will control the Idaho elections. It's just mathematically what will happen, unless people start waking up and start being active. Even just voting. Too many Republicans don't even vote, especially in the primaries. We've already had cases go to the Supreme Court about homelessness. And you would think that Idaho, being pretty much all Republican in our state capital, you would think that we would be the most conservative state in the country, but we're not. We've controlled the Idaho House, Senate, and Governor's office for the last 26 years. And other than just a few years there, we've controlled it, meaning Republicans, they've been Republicans, have controlled it for the last 40 years. So why are we not at the top of the list when it comes to conservative values? Why do we not have the smallest state government? Why do we not have the, why do we, every year, we have to go to the federal government and get about a third of our budget just to pay for the bureaucracies and the size of government? Why do we see more and more laws being passed that are heavily infringing upon businesses and on individuals and families in Idaho, when supposedly the Republicans and the Republican platform is all about those things, and we have control of the entire government of Idaho, so why aren't we seeing these things happen? And you have to ask these questions. Why is this what we're seeing? Why are we having things like Pride Fests and children's drag queen sessions, or going on? And I believe I have the answer. I believe I know why, and I'm going to present that to you. So I'm going to give you some facts. Did you know that Governor Little, as senator, not as governor, as senator, back in the 2000s, was the only state representative to support gay marriage? Even out of the Democrats. Even when the Clintons were not fully on board with supporting gay marriage, Governor Little was. Did you know also that Governor Little, under his leadership, that Idaho has increased its food stamps program by 24.2%, more than any other state in the United States? Did you know that Governor Little just recently designated $50 million of the COVID money, COVID funds, to free government housing in Idaho? And that's with a whole lot other money, a lot of other money that they put towards that as well. So why is this important for you to know? Why would I bring up these things? And it's because if you really think about it, state housing, government welfare, food stamps, healthcare, government health care. Oh, by the way, Governor Little also supported Obamacare and Medicaid when it was brought to Idaho. Okay, so we have to add free health care. So state housing, government welfare, free food, free health care, and pushing the gay ideology have been the staple of the leftist agenda for decades. Is that not the staple of the leftist agenda? And no person has pushed that more in Idaho than Brad Little. And his buddies like Scott Bedke and Wasden and these individuals. They have pushed this agenda, yet they say they're Republicans. And we keep voting for them. Let's look at Brad Little. So he was a senator, right? Now he got in, maybe he got in, we didn't know who he was, but then he starts voting, and we still voted him. Then he became the Senate pro temp, control of all the Senate. Then we voted him in as lieutenant governor. And then we voted him in as governor. And this has been his agenda since he got in as a senator. But we don't know this. We're busy working, and we're busy taking care of our families, and we go down and we think, well, he's a Republican, so we'll just vote for him. He's got to be a Republican. He's got to be a good guy. But that is how we're losing our state. And in fact, that's how Washington lost their state. That's how Oregon lost their state. California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, recently. That's how they lost their states. Because the people believed that they could go down and just support one party and not find out who the people are in it that they're voting for. So, if this was all I had to tell you about Governor Little and about Idaho, I think we could work through this and we can make some changes and get through it. But I have more, because not only is Idaho the fastest growing state with the most increase in welfare programs, But under Brad Little's leadership, and I'm going to give you some evidence here, Idaho was the first state to arrest people for attending church. And not very many miles away from here, in Moscow. Right? The first state. Imagine that. Now, I'll show you this. If we go to the Constitution, the United States Constitution, and we read the First Amendment, which the first 10 amendments are the Bill of Rights, right? So it's the first line of the Bill of Rights. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So it's just completely off limits. And then if there's any question, I got to grab my backpack here because I believe I have a state constitution, Idaho Constitution. I want to read something to you. Maybe not. Nope. I don't know where it ended up. But the Idaho Constitution is even more clear. It's even more clear about the right of a person to worship. It says that he shall not be molested in the state constitution. And yet we have this going on. We have this going on in Idaho. And it's hard to understand why, but this did happen in Idaho. And we were the first state to arrest pastors for organizing church services here in Idaho. What's that?
Outdoor.
Yeah, outside. Correct, outside. But it wouldn't matter, right? It wouldn't matter if it was outside or not. But they went to that extent, to go outside, organize a church service, and then you have these officers arresting them. Now, did these officers take an oath to the U.S. Constitution? They did. They also took an oath to the state constitution. And it is so clear in these constitutions that this right here is a violation of their oath. Why do officers take an oath to the U.S. and state constitution? Why are they required to?
They're servants of the people. They have boundaries on their power.
Yeah, boundaries on their power. And you're exactly right. What's that? There's that as well. It defines what they can and cannot do, right? But they take an oath so that they will uphold this above their superiors' orders, so that they can say no. And somehow we've lost that. We've lost that. And I get that they're in a bad position because if they say no, then they're put on disciplinary and they might lose their jobs, they can't pay their mortgage. I don't think that's a good enough excuse, but it's hard. So I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not trying to be non-sympathetic here, but they took an oath to this, an oath that they would uphold this Constitution that they would secure it against foreign and domestic enemies. And if a superior is telling them to go arrest pastors for organizing church, and it says in here very clearly that is not an authority that the government has, then these officers should have said no. They should have said no, that's a violation of my oath.
They should never been put in that position.
No, they shouldn't have been. And their superiors are certainly that domestic threat that they took an oath to. But they were. And we're all put in positions that we really shouldn't be put in. So we have a choice, and they have a choice, and the Moscow police that did this chose wrong. And it's terrible that Idaho was the first state to allow this to happen.
Why didn't the sheriff intervene?
So I actually had a conversation with the sheriff, and he claims that at the time he didn't understand what had went on. And they did bring him, and he booked him in the sheriff's.
Does the sheriff have more power than the...
Absolutely, the sheriff does. And they brought him to the sheriff. They brought these pastors. There were 3 of them they arrested. They brought him, and the sheriff's department booked him in jail. And so I actually believe that that sheriff would not allow that to happen again. I've had some pretty good conversations with him, but it did happen, and it happened in Idaho.
The sheriff is law of the land above federal,
Yeah.
in the county, that's the sheriff.
But most of the sheriffs are doing the exact same thing as every other officer. But, and we'll discuss that a little bit. So Idaho also was the first state to arrest a mother for taking her children to the park. Remember that?
She's fighting that right now, right?
She is fighting that right now. It's been over 2 years now.
When's the next court?
They just pushed it off another month.
Just on Thursday.
Yeah. Idaho was also one of the first states to begin rating businesses for not shutting down during the lockdown. So again, I just want to make it clear, we talked about officers doing this and how dangerous it is. But I also want to show you here, to my cursor, this is the stay-at-home order that was issued in Idaho. And it says this order directs all individuals living in the state of Idaho to self-isolate at their place of residence. So he's telling you have to stay home. You have to stay in your house. Down here at 3 it says direct all businesses. Basically, they declared, some businesses essential, some not. You know that. Right here, prohibiting all non-essential gatherings of any number of individuals. So that would include church. The governor issued this order, and that would include you can't gather for church, but he doesn't have that authority, right? So, and just to make it clear, this is page 9, section 9 of this order, same order, and it says the director requests that the sheriffs and chiefs of police in the state of Idaho and the Idaho State Police ensure compliance with and enforce this order. So they were ordered to enforce the order. In fact, it says the violation of any provision of this order constitutes an imminent threat to public health. Okay?
I would thought the key word there would be request.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't need that.
So he requested it, yeah. Well, obviously they granted it, yeah. So this is why they did it. This is who issued those orders. He requested the sheriffs, the city police, and the Idaho State Police to enforce his orders, and they did. They arrested pastors and mothers and business owners. They shut down businesses. They terrified the people of Idaho, and they did it under his orders. Now we might ask, was Governor Little doing it because of the health and safety of the people of Idaho? I see some heads are shaking no. Well, let's look at the facts. Let's look at the facts here, because the first he declared the state of emergency in Idaho on March 13th, if you remember, 2020. And that just so happened to be the very same day that President Trump held a press conference and announced that he was releasing $50 billion to states that were in emergency status. Well, maybe we were in emergency status. I don't think so. Or maybe we did have a big emergency, right? Certainly. But the problem is on the governor's own website on March 13th, that same day, they say that there was only one confirmed COVID case. So, and he put the state in a state of emergency. And then if you remember on March 25th, he put the state in extreme state of emergency. Do you remember that? Extreme state of emergency on March 25th. Well, that happened to be the same day that President Trump and Nancy Pelosi announced a $2 trillion federal relief packages for states that were in extreme state of emergency. Okay? We had 136 unconfirmed COVID cases. No one had died. And he put the state in extreme state of emergency on March 25th. He begins to tell us why, securing millions of dollars in funds in his own documents, Note this section 46601. I want you to remember, because he's saying this is the authority that I did this under. And I want to show you something here in just a little bit. Here's a letter to President Trump thanking him for $1.25 billion that they had received. Here's a very, very interesting executive order from Governor Little. Executive Order 2020-07. I believe that that's the year and the 7th order of that year. He says here, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 13, 2020 declaring a state of emergency, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 2020 declaring a state of extreme emergency, whereas Congress passed and President Trump has signed 3 legislative packages that provide state funding in response to COVID-19. Whereas I anticipate additional congressional action on federal relief packages to states regarding COVID-19. All about money. You know, they're giving out money, they're going to give more. I did what I needed to do with emergency orders to qualify for this money. And then he says, now therefore, this is that same, the next page, I, Brad Little, Governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby order the creation of a COVID-19 Financial Advisory Committee comprised of members appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor. So what did he do there? He says, I'm going to get my buddies together. They're going to serve at my pleasure. I'm going to bring a handful of them together. And we're going to get all this money from the federal government. And there's more coming. And we're going to decide what we're going to do with it. We're going to decide. Here's the last page. He says, for the coronavirus relief funds and other funds to be administered by the office of the governor. So his office is going to control all this money, and him and his buddies are going to decide how they're going to spend it. Now, how are the funds of the state supposed to be administered? That's right, by the legislature. Right? Yeah. Oh yeah, by the legislature. And why the legislature? Why did the Constitution of all the states actually say that? Why?
Elected.
Yeah, they're elected. They're our representatives. They go up there. That's right. And there's 105 of them. And they all have to fight and argue and go through processes to decide how the funds are spent so they're not wasted. So a small group of people don't get control of them and line their own pockets and keep themselves in power and do all of these other things, right? What's that?
They requested a special session, emergency session, so they can get in there and say, hey, up here in Ellsworth County, we've got this going on, we need to allocate those funds. He flat refused the entire time.
Yes, he did.
He dolled out that money to Simplot over here,
That-
favor company over
that's
there.
exactly
Our
right.
legislators were not allowed to go down for emergency session.
That's exactly.
They give us a supply.
That's exactly right. That what he said is exactly right. He used this money to line the pockets of his buddies, to keep himself in power and his buddies in power, and to do a lot of other things. And it is completely contrary to our state constitution and our form of government, completely. But he did it. Now remember the authority he said he was working under, the 46601, section 46601. Let's go to that. So, Title 46, Militia and Military Affairs, Chapter 6, Martial Law and Active Duty, 46601, Authority of the Governor. What did he do here? What did he implement in Idaho? That's correct. There's no, that's not a hyperbole. I'm not using it to excite anybody. He put the state of Idaho in martial law. Now, if you go down to Section 2, it says, during a period of state of extreme emergency, which he put us in, he made up, right? The governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise within the area all police power vested in the state. What did he do there? I mean, what's that? He became a dictator. He created, he saw this opportunity, he put the state in extreme emergency, put us under martial law, and then it says that the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and control of all policing power.
much money did you put in his pocket?
What's that?
How much money did you put in his pocket?
We don't know. But I will say, well, let me ask you a question. Do you know how much he received from the federal government that went directly from them to the office of the governor? So the last we know is $18.7 billion. Over 2 times the annual state budget. Over 2 times the annual state budget. And him and his buddies get to decide what they're going to do with it. So great question you asked if there was any accounting. So the controller, we have like big chunks of like, you know, just basically like healthcare and that. But we don't have a breakdown, except for the first $1.25 billion that he was. The controller did a good job breaking that down, and then they just stopped. So now, remember, we were asking the question of whether he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. I think there's some pretty good evidence here otherwise. But then, just recently in March of this year, he did a press release. And listen to what he says. He says, the emergency declaration, so that would be the lockdown order, the emergency declaration served as an administrative function to recoup FEMA dollars for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. Without the emergency declaration, we would not be able to provide historic tax relief, a step that's even more important now as gas prices and inflation soar. Without the emergency declaration, Idaho would not be the state with the strongest economy in the nation. So, yeah, that doesn't even make sense to logical people, right? I mean, anybody who's had to run even the finances of their own house know that this is just talking out the side of your mouth. But he tells us right here why he put us in emergency status, right? To get federal dollars. And then what's the cause of our inflation? It's the spending of the federal government, including the $18.7 billion that Governor Little got. And then he says, well, it's a good thing we got it because inflation is soaring.
Like it wasn't a concept.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really not funny. It's really not. But it's comical, right? Now, just to build on this, I don't know if you received a check from him, right, for the Republican primaries, but hundreds of thousands of Idaho voters received a check from him right before the Republican primaries, and this letter was attached to it. And it's Brad Little, addressed to the people of Idaho, and Brad Little signed it. And it says here, the economy of Idaho continues to blow past projections, and we are leading the country in economic prosperity. We achieved historic tax relief for Idahoans for the second year in a row. We are returning your tax dollars with our record budget surplus. So where did he say? Remember he said earlier about the tax relief, historic tax relief? So we know where that come from, right? And then he says that we achieved, meaning, you know, he achieved, we did such a great job with the finances of Idaho that we achieved historic tax relief for a second year in a row. What 2 years is he talking about? 2020 and 2021. When the state was locked down, people weren't working, businesses were closed, shut down, they weren't going to school, people were not traveling and moving, and somehow Governor Little and his buddies amassed a surplus and now is giving us historic tax relief during the dark months of the pandemic? I mean, look at this from the Hill. Down here it says, the impact of the pandemic on the U.S. and global economy was catastrophic. Economic historian Adam Tooze characterized its impact as being the swiftest and most comprehensive contraction of global economic activity ever. And yet Governor Little is saying that during those same years, we amassed a record budget surplus. But it's not because of anything he did or even a true surplus. It's because they received billions of dollars from the federal government because he put us in state of emergency and got that money. And it's very disingenuous.
Well, I mean, he just recently did this again, called a one-day emergency session. We had
Yeah.
$2 billion surplus, a one-day special session. He already had his cronies in place. We voted in how he was gonna spend that $2 billion without, just his people were there. And then we're coming up with a 0.2% cut business tax, and that was it.
Okay, so I'm gonna address that, thank you, because he sent this letter right before the Republican primaries, and then he called a special legislative session, he's correct, and they're trying to do it, they're gonna do it again, and guess what? The voters of Idaho are gonna get right before the primary election, or the general election. They're gonna get another letter and another small check. He is trying to buy the people of Idaho's votes. He is trying to do that, and he's doing it because him and his buddy got to control this money. They get to decide where it goes. And so this is what's happening in Idaho. Now, to top it all off, I want to go back to his press release. And this is his own statements. Because he said, I kept Idaho open, banned passports, never issued mandates for vaccines or masks. He says, the emergency declaration never violated or restricted any rights of Idahoans, never put Idaho on lockdown, and never mandated masks or vaccines. Then, if that was the case, then yeah, you said it cost you your job.
Well, I refused to wear the mask.
Well, yeah.
It was my choice.
But why were people then, if he didn't violate or restrict any rights of Idahoans, then why were pastors getting arrested? Why is a mother still today being prosecuted by the state? Did you know that her attorney bills are over $26,000 now? Imagine what that family has gone through the last year. He's got it. Businesses were being prosecuted, but he said he kept Idaho open.
That's right in Kendrick, guys. That's our backyard.
That's right. That is correct. Right up here. So I've got a video I want to show you that summarizes all of this. I just went through it, but we were able to condense this all down to. I do not know what's going on with my computer, and I apologize. So, let's get here. And if you like this, then this is something you can send to your friends to help them understand this. I might have to adjust the volume, but let me get this wide here. And Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. Since 2015, over 248,000 people have moved to Idaho. Imagine adding a city the size of Boise to Idaho every 10 years. Talk about a challenge. And to make matters worse, approximately 36% of the people moving to Idaho are liberal-minded. They want desperately to change Idaho into a more socialist, progressive, woke place to live. With Brad Little and the Republican good old boys controlling the Idaho House, Senate, and Governor's office for the past 26 years, being Republicans, you would think that Idaho would be the most conservative state in the country. But it's not. Here are some facts. As a state senator, Governor Little was the only Idaho representative to support gay marriage in the 2000s. In the last few years alone, Governor Little has increased Idaho's food stamp program by 24.2%. That's more than any other state in the country. Governor Little just recently dedicated $50 million in federal COVID relief funds to free government housing in Idaho. Governor Little also supported Obamacare and Medicaid expansion in Idaho. With Brad Little as governor, nearly 40% of Idaho's budget goes to state welfare. Why is this important for you to know? Because free housing, government welfare, food stamps, state-funded health care, and pushing the gay ideology have been the staple of the leftist agenda for decades now. And no person has moved that agenda more in Idaho than Brad Little. No wonder Idaho is in a fatal battle for its conservative soul. Idaho is not only #1 in growth and increased welfare programs, but during COVID, Idaho was also the first state to arrest pastors for holding church outside without masks. Idaho was the first state to arrest a mother for taking her children to the park. And Idaho was one of the first to raid businesses for not shutting down.
Just delivering this letter in response to you guys opening in contrast to the stay-at-home order.
Governor Little ordered Idaho sheriffs, city police, and Idaho State Police to arrest pastors, mothers, and business owners for not obeying his lockdown orders. Thousands of Idahoans were put out of business. Governor Brad Little simply does not understand the First Amendment here in Idaho. Religious liberties and the U.S. Constitution were decimated under Brad Little's orders. Now Brad Little is saying, I kept Idaho open. He is saying that his emergency declaration never violated or restricted any rights of Idahoans, never put Idaho on lockdown, and never allowed for mandates for masks or vaccines. If Brad Little's emergency orders never violated or restricted any rights of Idahoans, like he said, then why did police in Idaho strip the Bible from a pastor's hands, handcuff and arrest him for holding a church service? Why is an Idaho mother still being prosecuted today by the state for taking her children to the park? If Governor Little kept Idaho open like he said, then why were so many Idaho businesses categorized as non-essential and forced to close their doors? Why were so many people in Idaho arrested and prosecuted by the state for not wearing masks? And why did Idahoans lose their job for not getting vaccinated? If Governor Little kept Idaho open, then why did he implement a 4-stage plan to reopen Idaho? Governor Little is lying to us. He is a liar. And he must think the people of Idaho are so stupid that we will believe anything he tells us.
I never mandated masks or vaccines. We responded to a crisis with a balanced approach and kept Idaho open.
Because of politicians like Brad Little, we're losing Idaho to liberals. In short, Idaho is sliding down that path and becoming more like Oregon and California. You know it, you've felt it, and you've seen it. And I don't want to lose Idaho like the good people of Colorado lost their state. In November, we have a chance to stop Idaho's slide into leftist liberalism. We have a chance to stop the destruction that Brad Little and the Idaho establishment is bringing to Idaho. If we act now, we can keep Idaho's conservative foundation and enjoy the liberties that we want and need for ourselves and for our children. I'm Emma Bunny, and I'm running for governor because I'm sick and tired of all the political garbage that's happening in Idaho, just like you. I'm tired of our freedoms being taken from us, and I'm tired of the liberal agenda being pushed from our Idaho capital. I'm tired of the waste and corruption that is in our state and federal governments. I'm running for governor to fight and win the conservative battle in Idaho.
So let's talk. I want to be able to answer questions that you might have, really about anything, about who I am, about the policies that I've proposed, about what I think needs to happen, which I would define as my Keep Idaho plan. And so let's talk. Any questions? Any thoughts? Let's talk. Let me get this back up here. Sorry, hang on a second. Go ahead.
All right. So, doing with this whole Gay Pride Week and this, this drag show for children, which luckily we were able to get postponed, not canceled, and all these other things going on around the state, there's always one common denominator: the Department of Health and Welfare.
Yep.
They're funding this. They're sponsoring it. They're writing they're writing the book on this. What's happening here in Idaho with the gay population, which I don't know why taxpayers are funding special interest things such as this LGBTQGB thing.
What
can the governor do to
well, what branch of government is the Department of Health and Welfare under? The executive branch of government. The governor is the head of the executive branch. He's the one that appoints who the director is. He's the one that directs the budget and money going to them. He has pushed this agenda, as I have said, more than anybody else in Idaho. And we're not going to get the Department of Health and Welfare under control under Brad Little and his buddies. It continues to grow. In fact, you saw it in the video, but let me slow it down a little bit here. Do you know that 40% of Idaho's budget, almost 40% of Idaho's budget goes to welfare? And the majority of that, by far, is directed by the Department of Health and Welfare. It's the largest bureaucracy in the state of Idaho, Department of Health and Welfare. And they're the ones that issued all the COVID garbage. They're the ones that did all that, and Brad Little went right along with it and promoted it right there with them. And I will say this too, and if I can, I'll try to explain it. But we're concerned about people moving here and changing our state, right? We're not, at least I'm not concerned about people moving here that are fleeing from other states and because they want a place to live and be free. It's those that are coming here and wanting to change our state into a more progressively woke place to live that I'm concerned about. And they're so active and they're very political. And they're coming here and they're living here for what? Free. They're living here for free. Why? Because the programs of the state are allowing them to come here and actually inviting them to come here. And now they've got all the time, because the rest of us are working to pay for this 40% of the going to welfare, and they're receiving it. They've got all this time to go in and be political and to, and to turn our state upside down, and we're paying for it. So this to me is an extremely important problem to fix. Not only because it creates generational dependency on the state, there's certainly that, but it's also one of the reasons why they can come here and live here and destroy our state with our own money. And so we have to stop this. We have to stop this. We have to cut this out. And just interestingly enough, look at, so you got that 40% there. This is where our money comes from. Again, almost 40% comes from the federal government. Over 30%, 36%. Well, you can see how we can be free from the federal government, pay our own bills, if we just cut this out and then pay them for this.
Right.
Now, that's a real general, or a simplified statement, and I realize it's not going to be that easy. I'm not naive to the challenge that both of these are, but the reality is that. Or how about we minimize the size of government and put this in your pocket and still cut this out? Right? That sounds pretty good. Or how about we get in control of this? 61% of our land is controlled by the federal government. How about we get in control of this, and now we can start generating all kinds of wealth in Idaho, easily pay for our own bills. So usually I get a question about this, so I'm just going to go with it since I brought it up. I want to show you something. I got to get out of my thing anyway. Okay. So look at that. East of the Colorado Rockies, 24.4%, or 2.4%, federally controlled. West of the Colorado Rockies, 51% federally controlled. 61% in Idaho. The red is the federally controlled.
That's why we have all the fires.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting statement. Watch this. So look at this map, okay? Look at this map. Just focus on it. You can see, right? Now watch this. This is a fire history in the United States. Okay? Since we're on fires, this is what's going on as of 2 days. This is an up-to-date map of where the fire's at right in the west. Look familiar? What about this? Are they doing it because they want to preserve the land for the next generation?
No.
Maybe because of this. These are the mines in the United States. Gold mine, mercury mines. All of them now are paying the federal government to use these. Well, most of them. There's a very few private mines. Right? Look familiar? Remember this? Go here, and then you go here. The wealth that is in the West is so tremendous. What about here? Uranium mines. Okay? Remember that line, right? I can do this all day. I enjoy this, right? But it comes down to when it comes to Idaho, 60% of our land is being controlled by the federal government. And Idaho hasn't been able to pay its own bills in the last 38 years. We've had to go to the federal government in the last 38 years just to pay our own bills. And this is a battle that we must fight. We must fight this battle, or we can never be independent from world powers, Washington, D.C., and we won't be able to even feed our own family, because those people that are in these agencies, these federal land agencies, they're extreme environmentalists, and they want to implement a no-use policy. They want to get rid of our dams. They want to stop us from using it, ranching it, logging it, having farms, all of that. They want to stop that.
How do we take our land back?
So, good question. I actually haven't got that question for a while, and I like to answer it. But to give you just a little bit of authority, my family's been fighting this battle for now, 3 generations. So it's like, we're like the family that, ride dirt bikes for 3 generations, and they're just amazing, Well, we're like this, we've studied this. What I'm saying, we're not amazing. I'm just saying we've studied this. We understand this. So when I give you this answer, it might seem a little simplified, but it might seem very simple. But it comes with a tremendous amount of research and fighting and in the courts and all of that. And so the answer is, how do we go about getting this back? Well, if you look at this here. Let me get into just that. If you look here, and let's say you go to the county, go to your county website, and it'll be broken down into parcels. And you'll see that the entire county is broken down into parcels. Well, if it belonged to the federal government, then what's the county breaking it down into parcels for and saying that it's part of the county? That's because they came in later. They did not take this back, This wasn't something that was theirs in the early 1800s after statehood. Now, pre-statehood, it was under the control of Congress. But during statehood, everything changed. And this land was designated as Idaho land to be governed by the people of Idaho. It was broken up into counties, and the counties broken up into parcels. So if you go down to the county and you go to one of these parcels that are all red, and you go down there and you say to the county recorder, will you show me the title to this land? What are they going to tell you? Say, well, I want to see the deed. I want to see the deed. I want to see the title to this land. Anybody know what they're going to say? They don't have it. It's unappropriated land. It's never been appropriated. And that's what happened. The federal government saw all this unappropriated land, and then they came in and claimed it on top because we hadn't claimed it for ourselves. That's why you see these, what's the white area? That's the private. But why is it spotted all over? Because that was the agricultural land and the areas that people came in and claimed. It was later that the federal government came in and said, well, we're going to claim all this other unappropriated lands. So what needs to happen, to answer your question, is the state and the counties have the power to appropriate it. And we're going to appropriate it. And then the federal government is going to cry and moan. They're going to bring us to court. And it'll be the state of Idaho versus the federal government going all the way to the Supreme Court on this issue. It needs to be the state of Idaho. Because what's been happening prior has been the U.S. government versus Clive and Bundy et al. And you got this massive power with this huge, legal team. And they're in their own courts. And you got this rancher who's barely making in the desert because he has to run 1 cow per 100 acres. And they've just been crushing us all over, crushing the ranching community, crushing the logging community, crushing the mining community. And the state of Idaho, because they receive all this federal money, they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. And it should be them standing in between the federal government and these families saying, no, this is their right. They have a deeded right with the state. The Constitution says this, but they haven't done that. And that's what must be done. And that's what will be done under a Bundy governorship. And we have the possibility of having a great attorney general as well. Raul Labrador, yeah. Imagine that. We will fight this battle, and I am certain that we will win this battle. And I'm even more certain now that Roe versus Wade was overturned. And what did they say? They said Roe versus Wade was a state issue. They would have to rule that this land belongs to the state of Idaho, and the natural resources do as well. Imagine what that would do for the western United States. Imagine that. So anyway, it might seem like a simple answer. It's not going to be easy, but the process is actually easy. We already have the authority. The state has the authority to appropriate it. And so we do that. And then we fight the battles we have to fight in the courts in order to hold on to it.
Can I come in and say one thing?
Sure.
One thing that you go to IDL and you present that question, like, why in the hell is the federal government running? You know, the state of Idaho cannot afford to manage the lands. So if IDL says, we're going to take that land from the federal government, we're going to have to raise your taxes. That's our way of scaring them, saying we have to raise your taxes to maintain the force.
I say, oh wait a minute.
They're not.
Let me call bluff on that, or let me just call. I got to get it up here. I'm kind of having a heck of a time with my. Okay, so next time you have that conversation with him, then say, "What the hell is this all about?" There's over 100, just estimated in subsurface mineral rights, not the value of the land, the water, not what can be generated by using the land, just the subsurface mineral rights by the U.S.'s own estimations, $117 trillion worth of subsurface mineral rights in the western United States. And we want to say, oh, somehow we can't afford taking back our own land? Where does wealth come from?
Wasn't Idaho the nickel, the largest nickel provider in the world at some one point?
Yeah, so there's a reason why they call us the gem state. It's not because we're poor. They don't call it the Treasure Valley because everybody's on welfare over there. Well, no, wait a minute. I'm joking. But there's a reason why we were called the Gem State. There's a reason why it was called Treasure Valley. It's because there's a tremendous amount of wealth in Idaho, and for them to say that is just so ridiculous. You know, that's like a farmer saying, well, I don't want more land because it'll just cost me too much. No, he farms the land and he makes more money because of it. And that's how Idaho needs to be. And we're not talking about getting rid of our vast heritage of hunting, hiking, and camping and all that. That's not what we're talking about. Because before the federal government came in and claimed this, we were using as multiple use lands. So we were hunting, hiking, fishing, and guess what roads we were driving on? Logging roads, mining roads, right? And they were maintaining them, and you know, we'd drive past the logging operation, and we'd go hunting and hiking, and we'd drive past a mine, or we would see ranchers, you know, out there, cattle out there grazing. We'd go hunt around their water tanks, and as long as we didn't put a hole in them, then we're all good, right? And as long as the rancher didn't try to close the fence, we were all good. And those balances have to be there, but that's what we need to get back to. That's what we need to get back to. Did you have a question?
I'm just thinking that, you know, when you drive down Route 12, going to Missoula, all of this land that has never been touched.
Yeah.
And I think it's all federal.
Well, we got to stop saying federal and instead say federally controlled, okay? Because it really is not theirs. It's not theirs. But yeah, most of it, again, 61% of the land in Idaho is federally controlled.
See, constitutionally, government's not even really supposed to own mass
They're not.
amounts of
No.
law. It's like
No.
land. It's like 1 square acre military base. It's very limited.
Yeah. Article 1817 of the Constitution defines, and it makes it very clear, if the federal government is to own land inside of the state, what they have to do is they have to get consent from the state legislatures. They have to purchase it, and they can only use it for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings for the enumerated purposes that are in the Constitution, and that is it. But they have to get the state legislature's permission first, and they have to pay for it. They have to purchase it. And there is no room in the Constitution for them to be controlling 61% of a state. Yes?
Why are there so many people that do not know about the 10th Amendment or how it's defined?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that. I don't know why. I can read it here for you if you want, though. Anybody read the 10th Amendment recently? Very simple. It says, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. And there's no power given to the United States government to control land inside an enabled state. There's none. But it just needs to be challenged. We need to take it back. All right, other questions? Yes?
You're elected governor. Ben Key's elected lieutenant governor. What do you do?
I'm going to ask him to go get me my coffee. So the lieutenant governor has almost no power in the state of Idaho. And now they have a bully pulpit, but they don't really have they can split the vote. They can split the vote in the Senate, right? They can split the vote in the Senate. But no, there won't be probably much of a friendly, relationship going on between Bedkey and so he'll just be down the hall.
He's such a globalist.
Oh, he's terrible.
Yeah.
He is absolutely terrible. And I won't go into details of why I know that, because I wouldn't just say that about anybody. So, right? Except there was a question here and then right here. Yeah, go ahead.
What's your plan for medical freedom for the state of Idaho?
So, for example, a hospital that's receiving a whole bunch of federal funds or state funds, right? Look, it's very simple. You're not going to get state funds if you're going to be mandating vaccines for your employees, if you're going to be mandating this. You're not getting the state's funds. So there's certainly that aspect, and that'll for sure happen. However, people have said, well, are you going to, and I don't want to open a can of worms here, but people are going to say, well, are you going to regulate these businesses, so that they do this and do this and do that? Well, that's not my authority. But I'll tell you what needs to happen. And we saw it happen in 2021. You remember when was it 2020 or 2021? It might have been 2020, but I think it was 2020. But remember the hospitals came and said that their employees have to get the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, or shot. We'll call it COVID shot, right? And they gave a deadline of, I think it was St. Louis gave a deadline of September 1st. And a bunch of people quit. But there was about 20% of their employees, just under 20%, said, we're not getting it, we're not quitting. You're going to have to fire us. Well, they got to the date, right up to the date, and they're like, we can't lose these 20%. They're our best employees. They're the independent thinking. They're our best. They're the managers of all the other employees. We can't lose them. And so they said, well, we're going to push it off to November 22nd or something like that. And they threatened, and people were rallying and supporting, and then it gets to be November, close to November 22nd, and I may not be off. I may be off on my dates, and they again said, we can't do this. These people will leave. And so they pushed it off indefinitely, and it never happened. And that is the answer. The people shouldn't be going to the government saying, oh, protect us, protect us. You have a right to leave. And employment is not a right, but your right to leave is your right. And if you're a valuable employee and others are not valuable employees, you're going to make a huge impact. They need you. They need us to be able to work. And we need to remember how powerful that position is and use it. So, but if it comes to money, I as a governor, and also severing this flow of money coming from the federal government going to these corporations and these municipalities as well, severing that tie so that they're not held under this federal control and federal mandates is something that is my duty. And then it's the people's duty to deal with the unacceptable circumstances inside their workplace. So, thank you for that question. Right here.
Okay, couple questions. Before the two chickens decided to back out the debate, was it going to be televised?
Yeah, in fact,
Okay.
Idaho Public Television was one of the debates.
Okay. With that in mind, and because they'd already set that time apart, can you not go through with it with a single person asking you questions, it's televised, and your name gets out?
Yeah, well, I would love to do that, but they actually canceled them. KTVB canceled it, and so did Idaho Public Television cancel it. So
they're
They didn't
chickens
just
too.
cancel it.
what's that?
They didn't just cancel it. The
Well,
debates,
Uh-huh,
they canceled it because Brad Little would not debate.
yeah. So, yep, there.
Would you cancel public broadcasting in Idaho then? He said, I hate
Well, I don't know where the money flows there, because that would be the way to, influence that and stop that when it comes to and I don't know a branch of government, I don't know how they function. So I can't fully answer that, because I don't know if it would be, I don't know if it would be within the authority of the governor to do that, but we certainly have problems, including in our schools. Any other questions? Yeah.
So the second biggest piece of that pie was education. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of this nonsense, because I came from a tyrannical state just across the river, is organically grown in our education, right?
Correct.
They don't know the Constitution.
Mhm.
They got the drag shows going on. This stuff is not in Seattle.
Yeah.
Okay. So how would you reform it, and would you support competition for public schools by school vouchers and everything else to give them competition?
So yes, and yes. So you asked how I would reform it, and then you kind of give you a suggestion what you think should be done, and I completely agree with you. I believe the parents should have control of where the money goes, that it should follow the student, and I believe that is extremely important. Then all of a sudden now, parents in school board meetings won't be drug out by the police because they are opposing a school board. Now all of a sudden, parents are important. And the responsibility to educate children belongs to who? The parents. And if we decide to educate them ourselves, then that is our right to do. And the state should protect that right and not in any way infringe upon it or try to put us on a list or anything like that. However, if we choose, I got you, I'll get you here. So if we choose to have the public system educate our children, the parent should be the one to say that my child's going here, and that money that's designated for that child is going to go to that school. And if they're not happy with what's going on in that school, then they could pull them out, and that money would go to another school. And that way, there's this free market a little bit going on that is going to hold the schools accountable. And the parents can get together and all of that. So, but this is the only thing. It's not really a but. It's more of a however. However, if you do not free the schools up from the federal curriculums and the state curriculums and all that's going on, and that's scary to some people, because some people, we want to control more of the school because we don't like critical race theory and all that. And I'm saying, no, you have to free them up and allow the parents to hold them accountable. Because if you don't free them up, it's like here in town, let's say you got 10 hamburger shops, and they're all required to make the hamburger the exact same way. They get the hamburger, get their supplies from the same place. They can only charge the same amount. They have to hire the same way. Their buildings have to be the same way. Everything has to be the same. So what kind of hamburger are you going to get? It's going to be the same hamburger. It might not be that great. Most likely it's probably not going to be that great. So one guy said, well, you're going to get a communist hamburger, right? Well, apply that to our schools. If you have money to go buy a hamburger, but you can't get a hamburger any better in one place than the other, then what does it matter whether parents have the ability to direct their money or not? It's all going to be the same. So you have to do both. You have to free up the school, the teachers, the administrators, the school boards. The community elects the school board. The school board needs to have control of the entire system, education system in their community. And then the parents are directing the money. With that, there's like this great balance, right? Great balance. And I believe that we might actually see some tremendous education going on in Idaho if we would just apply those two principles. And they're just free market principles. So that is, I'm very confident about that being our proposal here in Idaho and being the plan in Idaho to correct our education systems. And you can see how much money is being spent. And by the way, this is not your property tax money. This is only what the state is putting towards it. This is not the money that your taxes are going to the county to pay for education. So you could probably double that. And we're talking now, a budget of almost $7 billion a year in Idaho. Great question. Thank you. Right. Was it? Oh no, right here. Right here and then right here.
My boys go to a private church school.
Okay.
And I asked them about the voucher system before, and they said absolutely not, because they feel that the voucher system, they would have to be under their rules and follow their rules in order to get that money.
Well, no one's going to push a private school into this.
Yes, they do.
No, I'm saying under.
They feel that money should be still going there, but they want to still run the school the way they want to run it. And not be under.
That's what I'm talking about. But that's what I'm talking about. You have to free up the schools from state and federal curriculums and allow them to run it if we're going to really correct this problem. But if there's a private school that doesn't want to be influenced or have anything to do with the government, they're not forced into this system. They can still, on a free market, get that money. Now, I don't know how it looks like when it comes to whether this money can be used. If they might just refuse that money, and no one's gonna. That's the same with the homeschooling. There's a tremendous amount of people in this state that want to homeschool and do not want the state's money at all. They want to be completely free from any state control while they're educating their children, and that is their right, and the state must protect that right and stay out of that business. So, thank you. All right, did you have a question? So, I'm just going to wrap this up a little bit. I want to go through Keep Idaho plan, and then I'm going to ask you to give you a little bit of direction of what you can do to help this. So I just boiled down the Keep Idaho plan, which is available on votebundy.com to read through and to download and to do whatever you need to do with it. But number one, protect private property. This would include the elimination of property tax and replace it with a consumption tax to protect our property and so that we actually own our property. Karl Marx, the founder of communism, or at least the one who wrote the Communist Manifesto, said that communism can be summed up into one sentence: the abolition of private property. So we must protect and defend and secure our properties. Number two, eliminate progressive taxes, which I talked about, property tax, and many other taxes. You can't do that without downsizing the size of government and becoming fiscally responsibility. But I believe, and again, I'm going to be close on these numbers, but I think that there's like 24 legislative bureaucracies that are authorized by the legislature in the state of Idaho, yet there's like almost 200 agencies. So you can see that we're way outside our constitutional bounds when it comes to the size and power of the government of Idaho. Number three, free Idaho from federal control. I think we've covered that pretty good. Number 4, make Idaho independent again. Well, we haven't been able to pay our own bills in 38 years. This is also Idahoans independent again. Where we can keep our own wealth and pay our own bills. We don't have to be dependent on the state. Where we can do these things ourselves. Rather than having, 40+% of our wealth in one way or another extracted from us, wasted, and then brought back to us in services that we don't need. Number 5, bring back the rule of law. Something that means a lot to me, but also if you do not have justice in a state, you don't have anything. And if the wicked, if you will, or those who just want to use the power can't be controlled, it's a terrible place to live. If you can't go get redress from something that's wrong, it puts you in a desperate place, us all in a desperate place. Number 6, make Idaho an economic powerhouse. We talked about that. There's no reason why we can't do this. We have a tremendous amount of wealth and resources in Idaho. We should be an economic powerhouse. 7, secure the quality of life for every Idaho family. Build that family. Guess what happens when we build and put time into our families? All of a sudden now, drug use is down, crime is down. The need for government, all in general, is down. CPS, all of those things now are minimized because we're taking care of our families, because we can provide for ourselves. We can do the things that we need to do. And then number 8, make Idaho an example of peace and prosperity to the rest of the world. And boy, does the world need an example. Applying these principles, right? And then watching what happens. We know what happens. We've seen it. We have a lot of history when we apply correct principles. Principles that God have given us in the Bible, that we have in the Constitution, that we see good examples in the Magna Carta and the history of the Anglo-Saxons. And we have these histories, these histories that we can look from and understand. And we apply these principles. Every time people apply them, they prosper, they flourish, they're in peace and prosperity. And all we have to do is apply them here in Idaho, and the rest of the world will go, man, look at Idaho. That's what we want. That's what we need. And this flame of freedom can be, built up again, can burn again across the world. So this is my Keep Idaho plan. And I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm just saying that we have to do it. We're in a situation right now, in a time right now, where we have to do it. Where else are we going to go if we lose Idaho? Where are we going to go? And so I'm going to leave you by asking you to do 3 things. 1, I'm asking you to subscribe to votebundy.com. Go get on my email list. And the reason why is because I'm going to send you material, videos, documents, things like that, so that you can send them out all over. So you can forward them. You got to be brave. I'm not saying it's easy. You got to be brave. You got to push through it and be brave. You got to open your mouth and be respectful, but be brave. So I'm asking you to do that, and then kind of leads into the second part of that, and that is to send this message out. Send it out. Also, get a yard sign. Put it in your front yard. You want to have a good conversation with your neighbor? Put a Bundy for Governor yard sign in your front yard. And all of a sudden now people are going, why? I love my neighbors. Why are they supporting this guy? I thought he was crazy. And now you get to have those conversations. You get to tell him, you get him go to votebundy.com. You get to send him a video. You get to go and if you go to the Keep Idaho plan, every piece of it has links. So if they have one little question about federal controlled land or about the rule of law or about property, eliminating property tax, you can click on it and send it to them. Have those conversations. Get a Bundy for Governor t-shirt. Put a bumper sticker on your car. All these things, and to to provoke conversation. And then third, I need you to contribute to my campaign. You can do it here. You can go to votebuddy.com because it's amazing what's happening. But and on two different levels, because I can show you how if Facebook likes one of my videos, I'll get tens of thousands of views on it. If they don't like one of my videos, I'll get like 3 or 4 views. And I'm not exaggerating that. So, and most of my videos they don't like. So I can't use the natural algorithm of Facebook and YouTube and all of that to spread my message. So I have to use paid ads.
You're on Gary.
Right? Well, but not enough people are on Gab. We have to reach outside our echo chamber. Like, my echo chamber is really good, and it's growing, and it's strong. But we're not going to win an election unless we get outside the echo chamber. So I need funds to buy paid ads. It's just that simple. I need funds to send that video out and the other videos that we're building. We've got a tremendous amount of material. It's good material. It's professionally done. Our campaign, and I can't take the credit for it, really. I have an amazing campaign staff that just works so hard. Wendy, she's amazing. And but we have to have your money. We have to. Yeah.
Who do you make the check bill
to Bundy for Governor. Emmett Bundy for Governor. Yep. Thank you very much. So I just leave you with something you already know, and that is Idaho is a beautiful, beautiful place to live. It's full of wonderful, wonderful people, the best, I believe, in the world. But Idaho is not only beautiful and not only full of people, it's also an idea of freedom that people recognize. And we need to benefit the rest of the world, the rest of our nation, by what Idaho does. And so I want to thank you for your time and thank you for your questions. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Evan to do one more thing for us, and he's got a peacekeeper's oath that I'd like him to explain to you before we go, and then I'll close it up for you.
Okay. Thank you. So I showed you this here, and I think we all have a problem with this going on. And I also kind of pointed out the challenge that our officers have, that if they say no, they could lose their job or be put on discipline or demoted, and that absolutely happens when they say no to a superior. And so my oath to peace officers in Idaho is that as governor, I will legally, politically, and physically defend them so that they can, if that happens, and they can appeal to the governor's office and the attorney general's office, and we will enact to legally protect them, meaning when they say no, they keep their oath and they say no to a superior because they are keeping their oath, then they can appeal to the governor's office and we will enact and come and protect them legally, politically, and physically if needed, so that they can say no, keep their oath, and still keep their job. So that is my oath to the peace officers of Idaho. And thank you all.
Okay, I did a head count here. There's about 25 people from this area, and what I feel like for 25, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of people here to hear Ammon, but really I'm looking at 250 people, because most of the people that leave the room after Ammon speaks will go tell 10 of their friends or their family members, and so there's 250 people in this room as far as I'm concerned. And Ammon's been up and down 95 and all over the state, and he's been up north. I live up in Bonner County. I'm from Spirit Lake, and we've been working with him since the beginning of the campaign. even as far back as when he was a Republican. And so, anyway, we've got, we kind of want to. He's gonna have to leave us and go down and be the governor one of these days, and we've really enjoyed having him come up to our neighborhood. And on October 1st, up in Coeur d'Alene, my wife and I and Shane and Kara, we've been in charge of basically 7 counties up north here to get up to reach all the people. And we've got a rally that we're asking everybody from all the counties that we've been at all the parades and the fairs and out just flag waving and sign waving and drawing the people in. And October 1st up in Coeur d'Alene, it's Saturday, October 1st, and starts at 3 p.m. and it's going to be a big send-off rally, sending him down, our new governor down. Last time he comes up north till he's a governor, and so we're having a big deal up there, and we want everybody to come up there and enjoy it. If you get a chance, you can. The time works for you. Then come on up on October 1st, and
there'll be food, auctions. There'll be music, kids games. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and then till then, tell all your friends and all 10. I told you, family members and friends. So bring them all with you. And my goal always was to fill up the room. Well, this room wasn't too hard to fill up. 25 people, we're pretty full. That's pretty good. So we have a success tonight with filling up the room. I was always worried when we'd put these things on that nobody would show up. But you know what? That's never happened. We filled the room a few times. And so just spread the word if you guys like what you heard and you really think that Ammon's going to be the best thing that happens to Idaho in the next 4 years. Join me, I believe it. Okay. Well, I thought we'd give them a little 4-year litmus test anyway. Anyway, I thank you for all coming out here and
watch out for the cords when you're walking around, please.
We still really need your support in this area. We know there's 40,000 people in Nez Perce County, and we know there's 40,000 people up in Latah. And I keep, because I'm so far away, I just consider it all one. So it's not that far for me once I come down to Moscow to come down here. So tell all your friends and tell them about Ammon and get on that website. You know, I told you about being a software writer. He wrote the most comprehensive, easy to get around website that you can imagine, and it's all in there. So read it and share it with your friends. Thank you all for coming out. And we